All right, good evening. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Trustees to order. We'll have a roll call and then if everyone would join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Carrie,
Present.
Hathaway,
Present.
Noel,
Present.
Riser,
Present.
we have quorum.
Well, I think you should also call the names of those who are.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Absent,
Yeah.
It's just Palmer.
Palmer, Brazeau, Flintoff are absent.
Yes. Okay, please join the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You should also note that we have with us this evening several Board of Trustees elect. We have you can introduce yourselves. Why don't we just do that?
Kathleen Brandt, soon to hopefully be elected November 5th.
Judy Monk, same.
And Ryan Gable, also the same, but running for treasurer, still trustee.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And our next item is adoption of the agenda. It's a simple agenda. We'll have time for public comment, and then we have our primary reason for calling this meeting is to talk about the draft contract that Warma is considering, and I know we have some guests here who may have comments about that, or at least they're available to answer questions. Are there any changes to the agenda proposed? All right, is someone prepared to move the adoption of the agenda? Moved by Noel. Support by Carrie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Agenda is adopted. Now is the time for public comment. This is a time for members of the public to speak for up to 3 minutes on any matter under the purview of the Board of Trustees, not limited to the subject of this meeting. And Trustee Riser, will you serve as our timekeeper, please?
Yes.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak? Heather, please come up, have a seat.
Charles Destel and Allison Sugiyama, 1960 Baker Road, Scio residents. We visited today to just voice our concerns over the many hands community that is being proposed to be put in near our home. Last we heard, there hasn't been anything moving forward, planned use or any approval for anything or even approval of the sale, which may not have anything to do with here or this. But we noticed that they had a open house recently this week and were promoting the continued development or likelihood of development of the Many Hands community. And I would like to voice my concerns of I do not want that in my community. I do not want it in my backyard. The reasons for my concerns are when these types of establishments fail to do their task correctly and when they fail entirely and are left with buildings that are zoned for use that otherwise wouldn't have been allowed in this agricultural zoned piece of property.
I've moved from Northville, which is home to previously the Northville Regional Psychiatric Facility, which I'm sure as many people know closed in 2003. Residents who were not picked up were put on a bus and sent to Detroit and dropped off. And it is currently home to the Hawthorne Center, which is currently being remodeled and is in desperate need of staff. These types of facilities are incredibly difficult to staff. They have incredibly high turnaround, and this particular facility wishes to rely on government funding and primarily using the fact that people will be living there as a large benefit to subsidize their pay, which is a form of a company town. If people wish to leave, they lose their housing. It is something that sets both the residents and the people working there up for abuse. And is a great concern of mine. While I do think that this project is something that is worthwhile, it certainly doesn't need to be on a 50-mile-an-hour road with no sidewalks on either side of it, with talk of having, you know, people being able to come onto the property and have access to the Sloan Preserve across the street. Again, no sidewalks, 50-mile-an-hour road on that section of Baker. And there has been so much disturbance of wildlife just from the construction over by the schools. We've had many pest issues since that construction went underway. And there are herds of deer that go through that area. There are coyotes that go through that area. And they need to have it securely fenced so that the people that were to live there who are not capable of, you know, being allowed unsupervised access would not be able to exit the facility, which means that wildlife would not be able to exit or enter the facility. It's also agricultural land. Sometimes you place a bet and you lose. Dave Letton doesn't want this to be agricultural land anymore. He wants to wash his hands of it and be done. I'm sorry, but this is not his solution. Sometimes you just lose. You don't always get the big payoff that you hope for.
I think ultimately we would like to see Scio continue its commitment to preserving land. I think that that is ideal land in between the Dexter and Ann Arbor area to be a preserve. And we have many concerns of just safety if this type of facility goes in, not for just for us, but for other residents nearby and of the community. So.
And we and none of our neighbors were alerted about this. In a previous meeting, Carrie Fabian had mentioned that local neighbors had been reached out to. That is not true. We reached out to our neighbors. We are the only reason, and one of our other neighbors who had done some outreach, we are the only reason anyone on Baker Road is aware of what this project is. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
So I just wanted to confirm, this hasn't gone yet to the planning commission of this particular proposed
I've
project?
seen 40 to 50 vehicles in that lot, and having been over there and seen that they proposed the parking to be right next to our neighbor's place was rather concerning.
Well, I
So
just
we
wanted,
wanted to get well ahead of this.
all I wanted to clarify is that when this proposed project comes to the planning commission, there will be more opportunities, there will be more notification to nearby residents. I think part of the issue is that it's a project that's being talked about before it's really entered the planning process here at Scio Township. All right, are there any other public comments at this time? Do we have anyone participating remotely who would like to comment?
We have 4 people participating. If anyone wants to speak, please raise your Zoom hand. Online. There are none.
Okay. Then let us proceed to the item of new business, and that is to discuss the waste hauling contract with the focus on the Mormont contract. And if I may, maybe we'll turn to you, Mariah, to talk about the contract. I know you've been doing some initial work on reviewing this, and my assumption is that we would sort of hear from you about your work on it and sort of perhaps go through and look at some of the comments that you have made on the document.
Sure. So hopefully you all received my edited version. I really only made comments. I didn't think that I was tasked with actually making changes, so it's more just pointing out things that I think need to be addressed. Some of the more basic things are just making sure that the So just to clarify, there's something called the membership contract, which is, has been referred to as a pledge. In some conversations, that's a contract where members say they want to be part of this RFP where WARMA goes out and gets a waste hauler. That's separate from being a member of WARMA. So some of my comments at the beginning of the contract are really mostly related to making sure that the membership contract and this, it's called a proposed section 6 contract. Section 6 refers to the statute. But this is the contract that WARMA is proposing would be signed with a waste hauler, one or more waste haulers. So just making sure that those two documents actually match each other as far as what we're calling them and some other details like that. One of the things that I did with this contract was to look at the contract that Scio currently has. We kind of nickname it the GFL contract. It's now with Priority, but originally it was a GFL contract. The two contracts are fairly similar, and after these months of working with the GFL Priority contract and finding that there are some parts of it that are very difficult to work with and maybe not as beneficial to the township as we would like. A lot of the work that I did in this proposed section 6 contract is based on that experience. So for example, if you get down to page 6, the liquidated damages. This is something that's been coming up a lot with the GFL priority issue. And you know, one of the things that we've run into is that yes, there is a column that says what the offense is, there's a column that says what the fee is, but there's no structure within this document that says how do you impose these liquidated damages? What's the time frame for when you have to let them know? What, do they have some right to say that didn't happen? Is there a conversation about it, or do we just send a bill? If we send a bill, does it just get paid? When does it get paid? What happens with the money? Particularly with this contract where it looks like WARMA would be the group that would be reaching out to the contractor, and it says liquidated damage to be paid by contractor to WARMA. I would like to have some language in the document, in the contract, or maybe in the member contract that says where that money then goes. Does WARMA keep it? Does it go back to the community who's having the difficulty? Does it go back to the residents whose garbage isn't being picked up? So I just feel like there are some gaps in here that we really, if Scio is going to be part of the membership agreement and therefore part of this WARMA agreement with a waste hauler, we would want these things tightened up. So that's sort of the basis of what I was looking at, kind of trying to figure out if there are things that we have experienced as concerns, clarifying some points that didn't quite seem clear to me. And that's essentially the review. I did also look at the RFP itself. I didn't get that out to you because I just took a look at it today. And there are a couple of things about the RFP
Tom sent it to us.
that would. Yeah, he probably didn't send it with my comments though.
No, no,
Yeah, so one of the things that I think Scio, we've been asking, and have maybe not gotten a full response on is the question of, is there going to be one service provider for all of the WARMA communities, or might there be multiple service providers? So the RFP implies that it says obtain one or more qualified service providers. I don't know then, there isn't language in here then that talks about how that works under the WARMA structure. Does WARMA pick those if Scio is going to have a different waste hauler, does Warma pick that waste hauler? So those are some questions that I have.
Is the input, and I haven't read that section,
Yeah.
but does it imply that there'll be different waste haulers within a given community or?
It
each
doesn't
community?
clarify that.
Okay, so that's.
So
another
that's another question, right? Right, so could half of Scio have priority and the other half have someone else, maybe? And if the idea behind this is you're handing over all of that negotiation to Warma, how does the community get involved? How does the local community get involved in that? I guess would be my question. So one of the concerns that I have sort of overall, and jumping ahead a little bit here, so someone can stop me if I'm just rambling, but one of the overall concerns I have is it seems like a little bit of a difficult billing and collection structure from what I'm reading. The RFP process does not involve the contractor invoicing the residential units or the member municipalities directly for any services. So it sounds like Warma will be invoiced. Warma will pay the invoice. I don't remember seeing this in the membership agreement, that then there's some structure about how the local municipalities pay that and who collects it from the residents. That to me just seems very complicated. I think the farther away the person that pays the bill gets from the person that's doing the service, the more difficult things become.
Mhm.
So I would like some clarity on that. I think it's good that we're here today talking about this, but I do wanna, I guess I wanna say that it's my understanding that the Scio Township can continue to be a member of Warma and not necessarily be part of this. So we can still have our own waste hauler and still participate in Warma and hang out with our good friends and get information from them and benefit from their company. So we're working on this tonight because if Scio Township does decide to be part of the larger contract, we want to make sure it's something that we like. But if we can't come up with something that we like, I don't think we're in a terrible position because we can still have our own waste hauling contract and continue to be a member of Warma, correct, Tom?
Right.
Bob says yes. Yes.
Yeah, we can continue to be a member of Warma. Sure.
And as far as the timing, it's my understanding that the current contract with GFL, now Priority, is slated to expire, if not renewed, at the end of 2025 with a 9-month lead time, correct?
Yeah, I believe they have to give us notice in February if they want to extend the contract.
So in 3 months, I guess not 3 months, where am I? We're in 4 months, we're gonna have a better idea of what Priority wants to do by retaining us, re-upping or not.
And that's the key, what they want to do, not what
No,
we
no,
want to do.
Oh, right, I get it. So, and then they're gonna say, Scio, it's been great, we're parting ways, you guys are whatever, we can get more money, we're gonna focus on Southeast Michigan and Metro Detroit area, whatever. And then we'll contract, we'll be faced with contracting with someone
Yes,
or agreeing to what Warma wants to charge us to re-up.
or revoking your ordinance and letting people,
Oh, yep,
Going-
that's right,
going
that's
back
right.
to-
Yep, right.
everyone has their own, it's a possibility.
No, yep,
And I guess I should say, the comments that I'm making tonight are just comments. I'm
No, no,
I'm
you're
not
not.
giving advice. I'm
No,
not
no,
telling you that
it's
you
just
should do
options.
one thing or the other. I
It's
just-
options.
yeah.
No, you're explaining what our options could be. Now-
Sometimes I'm very persuasive, John.
So one of the questions I have is if our lawyer who drafted the GFL priority represented us in that, and he's now representing Warma, he probably can't represent us in any renegotiations if he's doing Warma, or is that we cross that bridge when we come to it?
I mean, I don't feel like that would necessarily be an issue.
He might be thinking, oh, he might he want to steer us into the Warma fold? And we say, wait a minute, we like our autonomy or independence, or, I mean, so is that a potential issue or not? We don't see any conflict at this juncture.
I think that, I hadn't even thought about that.
And I'm not disparaging anybody's.
No, I understand that. You know, as I said before about having many layers in between the person who's paying the bill and the person who's getting the service, I guess I would say that I think that that applies here also. I think that if what you want is something that is tailored to you and is in Scio's best interest, that you should work with someone who is tasked with doing that specifically.
That would be you or Jim. Or someone else.
Or someone else. I don't, this is not a comment on Mr. Davis. I don't know him. I just think that, there are, especially over the last couple of months, we really have noticed that there are very specific things that Scio wants and needs, right? And so, yeah.
Counting response time and transparency and communication.
So part of, if I understand correctly, part of one of the questions before us this evening is whether to sort of give you and Jim the green light to sort of go ahead and work on this contract more in earnest in terms of coming up with proposed edits that we as a township would like to promote or propose.
I would not recommend working on that contract.
Oh.
Because that, if I might speak,
Sure.
that contract was a work in progress in a negotiation that had just started. We're giving it to you as an example to show you where we were, but not where we hope to be. So what you have is a contract that, I mean, I could go through this for you in 5 minutes and I think you would understand everything if you give me the chance, but I'll just tell you, I wouldn't work off of that contract.
Well, I'm a little confused because my understanding is this is the draft contract that Warma members are being asked to submit comments to.
Could I just go through what I think you should?
Sure, why don't you come up to the table?
Introduce yourself or selves. Yeah.
This feels a lot better.
These chairs are better at the table.
The same, I think.
So if I might just, I think everything you said is correct.
And who,
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I always just, my name is Robert Davis and I'm an attorney from Macomb County. And I am working with Warma on the formation of Warma through the current process that Warma is following.
Theo Egremont, Public Works Director, and I serve as the interim Warma manager.
And so you work for the county?
Yes.
Right.
So Warma arises out of an enabling act, MCL 123-301. And it authorizes one or more communities to get together and form an authority to carry out what maybe a group could do better and more efficient than one. So in Oakland County, we have the South Oakland County Waste Authority, Birmingham, on down to Hazel Park, 13 communities who've been banded together for 30 to 40 years, doing well in their contracts and staying under the market price by being a group as opposed to individual contracts. I represent the Mid-Michigan Waste Authority, which is 34 communities up in Mid-Michigan who banded together to try to do better on a contract where we have priority has half that contract. than they were doing individually as separate communities. So under the law, it says that once you're an authority, you can do two kinds of contracts. You can do what Mariah was saying, a Section 5 contract. And that's the contract that binds the members of the authority to the authority. And then you can do a Section 6 contract, which is the contract Mariah was referring to as the contract with the service provider. So when we first started WARMA, the goal of WARMA was to collaborate among the communities and try to enhance the community's reputation and ability to do more and more recycling. So the original concept was to get together once a month and discuss waste diversion and recycling and try to band together. We've done studies, we've been getting grants to do things on recycling studies. We've looked at contamination in various recycling streams. So that was the original goal. And then the authority said, well, maybe we should band together, see who can band together, who wants to band together. And Mariah's right. If you don't get on this, if you don't get in this, you're still, we're not giving up Tom, you know, he's still coming to the meetings and he's still gonna yell at me at every meeting. And I'm not giving that up. So yes, you would still be a member of WARMA, still encouraging to learn about all the things that we do and that we're studying. Just because you're not in this process, you're not out of WARMA. So we decided to take a group of communities whose contracts were apexing generally at the same time and who were interested in forming a group. And we said, well, let's go out for an RFP for that group. And that was the two IPCs, Pittsfield and Saline. So we did that. And so when we did the RFP, the way we fashioned the RFP was, and just because I've done this a few times, I said, here's the RFP in the form of a proposed contract set of terms. So in other words, when you respond to this RFP, please be advised that generally the way the RFP is written, that's the way your contract's gonna read. So tell me if you don't like anything in the RFP so we can negotiate that when it's time to do a contract, and give us your pricing on the various aspects that we're asking for in the RFP. Well, we did that. And it went out and we stopped because of some issues involving our own group and their ability to stay in the process. And so we hit the pause button. So what you have in front of you is a contract that was the first round of negotiations with Priority. Priority under the RFP process provided the best pricing. So we started a contract discussion with them. And what you have is the beginnings of that, but not the end of that. It never got done. It stopped. We rescinded all the RFP responses and regrouped.
When is this contract likely to be finalized?
Okay, so in our regrouping, that contract means nothing at this point. It's null and void, and it will never be approved in the manner that you're looking at it.
When is a contract with those 4 municipalities likely to be let?
Okay, so as we regrouped, we said,
What do you mean by regroup?
I just told you that.
Do over?
I just told you that we got to the point where we did an RFP. We received the responses, we collated the responses, we picked a person to negotiate with, and we started to negotiate. That's what you have, the beginnings of that negotiation. Other members of the group had some interesting issues happen to them, which rendered that they were no longer gonna be involved. So we stopped the whole process. We rescinded the RFP process. We basically wiped the slate. Now we are taking the same 4, and it's even better now because their contracts are all ending at the same time.
When do those end?
October of,
I think it's September.
I'm sorry, September of
2025.
25.
Okay.
And so we are now in the process of redeveloping the RFP itself. And so members of the group like Tom and other members from the different municipalities are supposed to be right now coming to Warma and saying, what does your community want? In other words, if Scio was gonna someday be part of this, what would they wanna see in the RFP that would ultimately end up in a contract? Liquidated damages, how are they calculated? How are they imposed? I just liquidated damage priority $16,500 last month. We just do it, we take it off the bill, we don't, and if they wanna dispute it, there's a process. But it's not in that contract, because we didn't get there yet. So we're asking you, if you wanna, if maybe you wanna join this contract, we want your input right now on what you would want the RFP to say.
But the RFP, including a sample contract?
The RFP is structured like this. We structured the RFP to be a request for proposal. And the beginning section says model contract terms. It says, if you are going to respond to this RFP, be aware you're accepting the model contract terms. And then we provide them with an exception form at the end. If you don't like a certain term, tell us what you don't like about it and how you'd like it rewritten. The last thing we wanted to do was get all, and I've done this before, where you get all the way through this RFP process and you can't nail down the contract. You know, you can't get it into it. You can't get the parties to a contract. So I like to give the contract as part of the RFP process in model terms. And that's all we did in the last RFP is provide model terms. And quite frankly, Priority only had three issues with our model terms.
This document isn't the right document, you're saying? We should be looking at a different
Yeah.
document to give in.
I'm saying you don't have the document yet.
It's because the RFP is not.
Correct. We still are asking the communities, the 4 communities, to tell us what needs to be in the RFP to make your boards happy. So
Mr.
we-
Davis, what is your preferred timeline to have all that feedback collected by?
Well, they've asked us to, I'm Tom Oth, the Scio delegate.
The famous Tom.
To Warma, we've been asked to have our comments in on the contract, the service contract. in
RFP.
Next month's meeting.
Well, the RFP contains the contract. The model
Yes.
contract.
Right.
We're starting,
And just for clarification, the contract, Bob, what you told me at the Warma meeting just before Celine, well, whatever happened. You told me that the contract was about to be signed.
No, I can promise you I never said that. I can tell you that Priority had submitted its final comments.
I think that the problem that I'm having is that if what we're talking about is our comments to the RFP and the RFP contains this model contract, that's what we're doing here. We're talking about getting revisions to that model contract back to you so that when the RFP goes out, it doesn't have these provisions that we don't like.
Correct.
But now you're saying, don't work on that model contract.
I am saying that model contract may not contain all of the feedback we're about to get from the other communities.
Well, sure, that makes sense, but
Right.
how else do you propose that we get you our feedback except for by using your model contract? I mean, I think
Okay, I mean, that's fair, that's
Okay.
fair.
from
We
my
can
perspective.
use it as a template. I just don't want you to think that it was ever binding or it was ever executed.
No, but Bob, my biggest concern is that we don't get you our specific comments on this. And then this gets attached to an RFP and then it is binding. So we want to make sure that we've told you everything that we're concerned about the model.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's what we're
That's what we're
hoping.
doing.
Even if we don't join, we can make your contract better, having just gotten burnt with a transition from one to the other.
Well, I would suggest that your input is very important because someday you may insert into this contract. And if you are going to maybe someday insert into it, you want to insert into something that you had some input on,
Yes.
Right.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Can I answer the timeline question? Because I think that's something that's been brought up a few times. I want to make that definitive. So I've asked the members to bring their comments to the next meeting because it takes a little while. Our goal is ultimately to have something at our December meeting that the board of Warma can approve, and then we put out in January.
An
So
RFP.
we're starting that
Yes,
process at the
yes.
next meeting.
So you wanna have an RFP with a
This sounds-
improved contract and the new and improved contract that gets put out in January, and then how long will waste haulers have to bid on that?
I have a draft timeline that I can send to you.
It's part of.
Yes.
We
one
put
of
the timeline in
packages.
the RFPs, when the responses are due.
60 days, 30, 90?
Ultimately, I think by the time it's finalized, I think it's April is our timeline when we're looking to have that completed.
I
Don't
see
quote me
it.
on that, but it's inserted into the
Okay.
I
materials.
see a couple other people who would
Yep,
like
thanks, Will.
to ask questions. I don't know who was first, Kathleen or Judy.
Oh, Mr. Davis, do you suggest that we basically discard what is in front of us, which is some 60-some pages, discard it and have you send us the one that is more
No,
closer
no.
to your model?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that you totally discard it. What I am suggesting is that regardless of what this says, and regardless of what your current contract says, you've learned a few things over the years about what you want. Would that be true? You've learned over the years some things you don't like. I would like you to send those to us so that when we do put the RFP together that contains a model contract, not a binding contract, a model contract template, that I make sure that I put in your concerns.
Okay, so that means that we do discard this
You
document.
use it as a guide, I just wouldn't use it as gospel. I would say your independent thoughts are better. What is it about your current waste hauling situation that you don't like,
So wordsmithing this,
other than that?
yeah, wordsmithing this document by all these engaged individuals, when that seems like not a good use of our time.
It can be used as a template to help you think about the things that you would want in a new contract. I just don't want you to get married to what this says if there are things that you would like that are different. So for example, let's go to some basics. Mariah raises a good point. She, I think, agrees that you're entitled to stipulated penalties for certain events. If you catch a waste hauler mixing yard waste in with trash, that should be a stipulated penalty, right? Agreed? I think we would all agree on that. And you shouldn't have to litigate that, and you shouldn't have to go to court on that. It should be a stipulated penalty. She's raising the point, well, let's have a process in the contract that lays out how do we communicate that and how does it, we just take it off the bill, by the way, Mariah.
Yes, but we, in
I-
our
I-
community,
I-
everyone pays their own.
I
So
understand.
there's no way for us to.
I understand. So those are the nuances. I mean, when we started this, one of the nuances was, do people want just carts? Do you want a just cart contract, or do you want carts plus? Or do you want, recyclables every week or every other week? Do you want yard waste to be limited? All of these things we've been thinking about. And so we want to hear from you what you want, what you would want in a contract if you had your way.
Do you agree though, Bob, that you are not also gonna start from scratch? So if we just send you a list, you're not going to draft a new contract.
No,
You're
I'm gonna
use
make
this
it work in here.
Right, and all the other communities are also looking at this.
And I gotta
And
make
they're-
theirs somehow work.
Okay, so does that clarify?
A little.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you had a comment.
Yes, so I want to touch on what you just said. The time frame seems to be, you want to launch this in January. You want 4 other municipalities to give input. You want Scio to give input. Based on that time frame, how does Scio negotiate what ultimately gets in there from these other 4 municipalities based on your very tight timeframe?
Because you will see the RFP before it goes out.
Well, okay, that's, we will see it, but where, how have you built into your process that we can see it and we can also provide input to whatever contract you ultimately decide?
Yeah, through your representative, and that's how the other municipalities are doing it, so that's why we've asked the reps to bring it to the next meeting, and we'll continue to discuss those at the November meeting, and then ultimately, if there's last minute changes that the board can agree on at the December meeting, then that could also be brought, but we're looking for people to start that conversation now so that we can have those discussions at the Warma meeting.
Well, I
That's
mean,
the
you
more
just
important
mentioned a
review.
bunch of things about, do you want every other week? Do you want cards? Do you want yard?
We started there years ago, talking about those basics. And we've been talking about, some communities, for example, in other organizations, people hate carts, believe it or not, people hate carts. So I have some communities within one contract, they only want bag trash.
Okay, so I
So-
don't
so-
care about these other communities. I wanna know what your starting point is for Warma. Because you introduced all these variables. So what have you established as the standards so far? Is it the same as what Scio has? Every week?
Yeah, I mean,
Cards.
that's what ended up in this draft contract.
I'm gonna ask two questions, and one's gonna be to you guys at Warma, which we may not know the exact answer, but this has gone out for an RFP. And the next question is gonna be to our attorney. First question is gonna be, how much money is this going to save Scio being part of a bigger group? I'll let you think on that for a minute. And then Mariah, I guess we can't join contract if priority gives us renewal notice.
Right.
So I guess that solves that problem. So there's no like necessarily implication financially there for us. But on the other hand. Okay, I'll leave that there. But I'll go back to my first question of, is the juice worth the squeeze? If we're gonna save $500 over the course of the year, we're spending a lot of time and effort for a lot of.
If I may, the answer to that question about whether Scio or anyone else would save any money, first of all, you never can prove it for sure. You just don't know. But the idea of a large contract is the economy of scale. So the more people involved, the lesser you're gonna have to pay as a group. I mean, it's kind of simple stuff, but that's the idea. Now, is it really gonna work that way? That's a much harder question to answer. And Warma had a lot of data from the first go around of the RFP and the negotiations up to a contract. And the pricing from the chosen service owner, which was priority, is difficult to really say for sure whether you save an awful lot of money, because in a way, you're comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing a contract which was pre-COVID and which did not include any fuel surcharge to today, several years later, where COVID has increased the price of virtually everything. And trying to figure out whether we would have been better off going with the Warma group, everything else being equal. It's hard to say. Best I can say, and Mark Perry, who's the alternate for Warma and who might be here,
He's on, I tried to promote him, but he declined it, so I don't.
Mark is better at the money analysis of this. And without going into tremendous detail, which can, after a while, give you a headache. But the idea was that the price that we are paying to now priority is perhaps a little bit more than it would have been under the Warma contract, maybe. But It's in the ballpark. Mark, if you're there, is that right? Am I wrong on this?
You look like you're appealing to a deity.
I think that regardless of that, it's a good question, but what we're really talking about is
Joining.
if we ever want to be part of this membership agreement where we're under the Warma service contract, we want the contract to be something that we're.
As good as it can, we can
Absolutely,
get it.
as good as it can be. If we never decide to do that, we still want to know that it's a
But
good
even,
contract.
you're right, and even if let's say they renew, because they have that option, right?
Mhm.
And that's good for another
5 years.
but this contract will still likely be in effect. And I do have a provision in here where I've allowed members of Warma who are not part of the contract to come in. So if in fact you do come in after the 5 years, Mariah's right, you wanna make sure you're coming into something that you had some input on.
I do want to answer the cost question because I do have the numbers here, because we did get in a negotiated phase with Priority, and the numbers that we had that would be applicable to, I guess, starting in 2026, because this would be taking place late 2025, would be $20.17. I think in that year, in your contract, you're paying something like $26 or $27. Note that Warma would have some administrative fees because we'd have to staff the agency, but that would take over for what Scio would be doing, so you're not answering the call. So you wanna take the administrative side and factor that you're not doing those things internally. So there's a cost benefit and you wanna think about those trade-offs. It would also be that your residents would not be paying Warma directly, because we're not gonna bill everyone. It would probably be something that you'd have to do through your taxes, is that right?
Taxes. We would have to increase the taxes. We would have to create the taxes.
I know trustee Noel has a comment and then trustee Carey.
Killing's got stuff here.
Okay, Bob, a couple questions. Are you saying that there could be different terms in different contracts for different communities?
Now, I'm saying there'll be one contract, but there could be peculiarities within that contract, which there were in this one, that relate solely to a certain community who's in the group. So for example, is it Ypsilanti City, was not signing up, they were gonna be part of the contract, but not for recycling. And so that went into the bid process, that you would not be doing the recycling for Ypsilanti City. And so that was accounted for in the bid responses. That's a peculiarity that that city raised with us prior to the RFP being completed. There was some discussion about having recycling being every other week. So we went ahead in the RFP process and said, give us a bid for recycling every week. But give us one also that would, what would you be charging if it was every other week? So we got that in the bid process. So as we were listening to the communities who were forming the basis of the four, primarily the floor, we were taking into account their local peculiarities. So I know you don't want to hear about other communities, but this happens. The way we have to manage waste in Birmingham is different than the way we have to manage the waste in Hazel Park. In Birmingham, it's almost like you gotta go in the house, fetch it, clean up the wine bottles and get it out to the curb.
Yeah.
I'm offended by that.
I'm saying, but I didn't mean to offend you. I'm just saying, people have different, like leaf programs. Birmingham has a ton of trees. Some of the other communities, Troy doesn't have as many trees. So we had to account for the leaf differentiation in the contract.
I wasn't done. Let me go.
No, and I have been waiting.
I know you've been
Okay,
waiting,
so-
and Kathy has too.
Take control and give everybody a turn, please.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so what you're saying is that potentially different communities are going to require different terms in the contract.
Different nuances. And again, I did not mean to raise an offensive comment, but we have to manage, if you have something peculiar that goes on in your community, I want to account for it in the
Okay,
RFP.
so Bob, one of the problems that we've had in Scio Township as a result of the prior contract that was negotiated with GFL is that many people had situations where, for example, a long curvy driveway, and they had taken care of that previously with the prior provider. But GFL, now Priority, couldn't accommodate that unusual, supposedly unusual situation, and there've been problems with those curvy driveways, long curvy driveways. So what I'm saying is that many of the peculiarities that existed at Scio didn't get addressed in the GFL contract.
And that the curvy and the long driveway issue did become an issue in this RFP. And we worked with the communities who were giving us input about what did it mean to put it out at the curb? And I think our RFP ended up with some distances on each side of the, we had to account for some peculiarities on the distances away from the driveways. So that became an issue in the current RFP. So those are the kinds of things we want to hear from you. We want to hear what is peculiar to your community that would have to be in a contract for you to like it.
Okay, go ahead, Joan.
Listening to all of this, so we have 4 communities right now that are interested in being in this RFP. And all of them are in separate contracts with their own provider.
Currently,
Okay.
yes.
And then I'm hearing all these nuances, the nuances from the 4, possibly the nuances from us, and you're gonna put it all into one. And our communities are different. So what is the benefit of this again? Of having all of these, because it kind of sounds like eventually it's just gonna keep growing to take over Washtenaw County? I don't know, I'm just asking. So what is the benefit of joining again?
The primary benefit is to get better pricing as a larger group than you get singularly at the same time, accounting for what you need.
And I'll also answer that if you look at the proof is in the pudding look at the authorities and they've grown. And those authorities, members can get out. There's termination clauses, there's ways to get out. There's very few instances of members or municipalities getting out of authorities. There's a lot of examples of authorities growing. So there's clearly something that's attractive to it. Usually it's better pricing and there's someone that's managing it, that's what they do.
Okay, many of our residents had really good pricing before we got this GFL contract. Yeah, and so there's just a lot of issues that, I just see because based on us and what we went through with our 10-year contract. And here, so the RFP, the nuances, and let's say the bids go out, you get you create the contract, but this is a 10-year contract with another 10 years. So if our community says, well, we don't like this aspect of the contract, we don't have a choice. We're gonna have to live with that for 10 to 20 years. Is that what I'm understanding? Because you can't tweak it because it's a closed contract.
Well, if you read further down, there's 4 reopeners, 2 per every 5 years. To address service related issues. And that was something that, quite frankly, Tom was fairly vocal about having a reopener clause so that these issues could be addressed formally twice per 5 years at the request of the community. And so that was in the RFP.
I wanted to follow up on something you said. You said that many of the existing clients in some of these contracts, authorities elsewhere aren't leaving. I want to ask if indeed that might be due to current situation in southeastern Michigan where we don't have as many options as we used to for trash haulers, trash providers. And people, communities have fewer choices.
Well, I would agree with you that the pool of who responds to these RFPs has shrunk. And that littler waste haulers over the years have been, overtaken. And so all of the RFPs that I've been involved with lately have been the same general cast of responders. It's been Priority, GFL, Waste Management, and Titan. And then depending on where we're at, you'll get maybe a local who's been in business for a while, who was the one that Stevens bid on this transaction. I think they're a local. And actually they did a nice job on their bid. But Priority had the sharpest when it came to their responsive pricing. So you're right, the pool has gone down.
I thought GFL was no longer taking out community residential waste hauling contracts.
They sold off on an asset sale a majority of their collection contracts. They're still in business. Southeast Michigan, they sold off a majority of their routes in Southeast Michigan.
And the reason why these larger companies are bidding is because there's a larger area. And if there was smaller areas, that would open it up to more companies and potentially more companies be starting.
Correct, you're correct. And so what some of the authorities who accumulated communities over time did in 2016, because some authorities were all contiguous communities. So picture a big block of communities. We developed a concept that said, well, let's get rid of boundary lines. All of these waste haulers have a little machine, they put in route optimization. So if they were looking at Scio, they would optimize your routes for efficiency. What we did in one contract in 2016 was we got rid of the boundaries of the communities and let contractors bid on blocks of houses, not driven by the community boundaries. And the prices went down 16%.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Why don't we go in order? John,
Yeah, I don't want
Brian,
to
and Jim.
jump. How many communities are in Warman now?
8.
And there's 4 on here, and we're the 5th. Who are the other 3?
Ann Arbor,
Okay.
Ann Arbor Township, Dexter. What am I missing?
Chelsea, Manchester?
No, we're
Superior?
southeast,
You have to
And then,
Mylan. No.
when is Ann Arbor?
Township.
Ann Arbor Township? Did you say Ann Arbor?
It's
Township?
Ann Arbor Township, yeah.
The biggest one, Ann Arbor?
And Ann Arbor has made it
Part of
clear,
it.
Ann Arbor has made it clear they will never participate in this. So far, they will never participate in this process, but they want to remain part of Warma.
Okay. And a question with respect to Warma is a Section 5 authority, correct? So on this one, they're gonna bill Warma, and then Warma, the townships would pay Warma. How much do you folks add for the services that Warma provides to a bill? So if a bill is $100 a quarter, what would it become with the Warma fee on top?
We've been discussing that. We've been looking at, we're still sharpening our pencils on
What's
that, but.
what's the range?
Range
Yeah.
between 25 cents and 50 cents per household per month. So between, what is that? $3 and
$6 a year.
$6 a year.
I have a question, a follow-up on that regarding Warma itself, not the contract, but what services would you be providing to our residents, to our actual customers? And then what would your relationship be then to our municipality? So what services would you be providing? And he asked what the percentage was or what the cost was. And then how is that staffed? How would you be delivering those services then to us and to our customers?
So we'd be hiring, the plan that we proposed at the couple meetings ago was to have 2 staff members. One would be primarily answering phones, so that would be the one thing that we'd be taking on for the communities is addressing resident phone issues. And then we'd be managing the contract. So that's administering it as far as issues that are coming up, stipulated penalties, working with all the municipalities to make sure that things are occurring and the services are being provided as they should.
So tell me where you're housed and how you have figured that one person will be able to adequately handle X number of.
So both would be answering phone calls during busy times, so I want to make sure that that's clear. But that's what we've discussed. They'd be working remote, so we'd be having 2 remote people. So we wouldn't be having a physical office.
So have you run calculations on how many calls you would have? I mean, there's models that run call centers. And so are customers expected to be on hold 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes?
Sure. No, we have not.
Well, we've looked at the, I think you guys know probably familiar with the priority porthole system.
Yeah, but it's not working.
It's not working. Trust me, it's not working.
Yeah.
And they know it's not working. If you listen proactively to the priority presentation, it's pretty impressive.
I'm not, no, stop.
Well, what I'm getting
Not a
at-
discussion about priority.
No, what I'm trying to get at is, we went to them and said, how many calls are you getting? Because they're handling the calls right now. And so we're trying to get their numbers so that we would have a feel for what the number of calls might be. Right? So that we've been trying to go through their porthole system to figure out their call volumes.
Well, if we can't anticipate better service, I mean, call volume is driven
By the service.
by service.
You are 100%
Okay,
correct.
so therefore, if service is improved at the level that we would expect it to be,
Calls
the
should go
call
down.
volume should go down significantly.
You are 100%
So
correct.
therefore, taking their numbers actually implies the service is going to stay the same.
Well, we're looking at their numbers before they absorbed 168 new communities. And they had a pretty good low number of calls in their communities prior to this latest asset purchase. And which is, you guys have received the bad part of that. So we're looking back historically at the calls that contractors get from various types of communities, and we're trying to assemble those numbers.
And I appreciate you answering, Mr. Davis, but our agreement, the municipal agreement, will not be with Mr. Davis. It will be with Warma. And so I'm interested in how Warma is going to take care of us and our customers.
2 people.
That's
Is
what
That's
that's,
the
Expectation.
current answer, right? I know Ryan and then Kathleen both had their
Thank you.
hands up too.
So 2 things that I just looked at. One is, obviously, you mentioned the contract that you don't want us to look at, but you said we can look at as a template. There's 30,000 people on that listed on the cover page of that for the 4 communities that do not include ours. We have 6,800 parcels in this community. Maybe the number of service addresses is a little bit lower because some of that's commercial. 36 or so thousand people, and 2 people supporting them is not going to be enough, even when Priority and GFL were having a good time before COVID, we'll call it. It's just not enough. I also don't believe that Warma is gonna fully be able to answer all the questions anyways, but a lot of these are gonna be service related questions and billing related questions where if in theory, some of these bills and some of the service related issues are mainly going to be with the haulers, so it seems kind of odd that Warma is gonna be doing the customer service for it, other than the billing that Warma is going to be doing. One thing I did notice in the RFP that we're, I guess, looking at but not looking at, was something for roll-off containers, which is odd for me, because I'm thinking why was there roll-off containers quoted in an RFP unless I misunderstood this?
Special events.
Communities asked for it.
The peculiarities of particular communities.
Communities,
Yeah, so some communities said we do so many special events, we like a roll-off to be available. We wanna know upfront how much we're gonna pay for that.
which is also business GFL still in.
Yes, you're right, you're right.
So for clarity, will the model be that Warma bills the hauler and the municipality bills their residents? Is that the model? Okay, so Scio had a problem with that model before. Citizen input didn't want that model, if I understand, when we went to GFL, that they were opposed to adding on additional costs to have Scio Township manage that. So we already have some sense of citizen input that that's not something they wanted.
They didn't want the contract in the first place, but.
Well, but this was specifically
Oh, yeah.
one of, I don't know how that, it was clearly expressed the citizens did not want centralized billing through Scio Township.
Because of the extra fees.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how
And we don't have the
ultimately,
manpower or.
I don't know how ultimately that got resolved, but initially that was the contract terms,
So
right?
then, right, and GFL already had their own administration, so they were going to handle it, and then complaints would still come through us. And then we would contact GFL to take care of the issues.
So I think that's one of the peculiarities that we would want to make sure is in the contract. I've already made a note of that. Because I do think, I mean, it's kind of what I was saying earlier, I do think it's important that the people who are paying the bill have some direct connection to the waste haul. I don't like you're removing it 2 times, right? You're removing it to Scio, then you're removing it to Warma. Actually, you're removing it 3 times, then to yeah.
And
So that's something that we should put in our comments to go back to Warma.
Can we
So
bring
the
it back?
the current contract with Friday Waste, I personally do not like their sense of a portal that the residents lose, or the township rather loses visibility to complaints. I'm not the kind of purchasing agent that just trusts that you're giving me the data. I would rather hold the data. And so now we're getting into a trust situation that Priority will give us our complaints.
Priority is now giving the communities their own access to the porthole.
It's
So they
still,
can see real-time events.
it's still, okay.
It's still their data, it's still there.
It's still their data.
That's the promise. It hasn't been.
It's not working,
And it's still filtered data.
it's still not working.
So for whatever reason, the promise of this sort of interactive portal for accessing complaints or seeing complaints in real time is not working.
Many
I really
communities,
like this.
a lot of communities, they're halfway are having the same problem. They just can't get in.
Yeah, well, I've gone through the training twice and there is no portal to go to, but setting that aside for the moment, the problem of priority, I think what I'd like to do is
Thank you,
bring this
Christie.
back to the question that we started with earlier, Mariah, of sort of, I think, tasking you with aggregating all of the comments on the contract, the template that we're working with at the moment as the vehicle through which to communicate Scio's input. What's the best way to do that? Do we simply say to you, please go forward? Do you need to gather more input? Do you,
I think what makes sense to me is to take the contract with the notes that I've already made and make some changes and have some other side notes, get it out to you all and have you respond to that.
And then ultimately we roll it up and send it to those folks.
Yeah.
I want to get Tom's input too, because he's.
We got
What I had
Tom and Mark, they've attended all,
It's everything.
yeah.
what I had suggested at the last WARMA meeting, or excuse me, 2 meetings ago, I had actually made a motion to have the proposed contract reviewed by one of the soap stocking firms. Because, and as I mentioned to Mr. Davis at the meeting, it's no insult, this is just a really big contract with a lot of money involved. It's gonna last potentially 20 years. And rather than have, you know, Mr. Davis do it or Mariah, give it to one of the soap stocking firms who does this for a living, does the contract review for a living, and pay him. It's gonna cost money. But I had
I don't know that
suggested.
everyone understands what a silk stocking firm is.
Oh, sorry. One of the bigger firms that has a wide range of attorneys in different fields, most of which dealing with business
I
contracts.
think they have a lot of women in their
That sort
staff.
of thing.
Yeah.
Well, some of them might.
Silk-
The point is, you want the best contract writers out there.
Absolutely.
And they do. And I had made that motion, but it was sort of.
Tom, your
withdrawn
motion, your
table.
motion was related to the section 5 contract.
Well, same thing would apply to this one. Actually, my motion, if I remember correctly, was actually to the service contract.
And
That's-
I don't have any ego wrapped up in doing this, and I think that Tom has a good point, but again, if what we're talking about is what Scio needs, that's separate than getting a strong contract for everyone, right? So maybe after we put together the Scio part of it, it goes somewhere else, but I wouldn't hand it over now to someone who hasn't been part of the conversation
Yeah.
and hasn't been part of the complaints and hasn't,
Well, we
Doesn't
don't even
seem
have a
efficient.
contract for them to look at
I
because we're
agree.
not supposed to.
Well, and you're right. But the other problem is that Warma is moving relatively quickly to get a contract. And this is all gonna take time.
A little bit more clarity, please. Scio will have our nuances. Pittsfield will have their nuances. And we have to, so our nuances will be for just our community, or it's gonna be in the contract for all communities.
If it's a common nuance, then it would be, right, but you may have something very unique that you want.
And then we will be able to have that.
Yes,
So it's
just like
really,
Gipsy was able to have no recycling.
It depends on what it is.
so there are mini contracts within a bigger contract.
There are, so when you look at the contract, it's divided between the residential waste, the yard waste and the recyclables. Each community gave us, and Tom was very helpful, gave us comments about how they like their collection of the waste itself, what peculiarities they have with yard waste. And what issues they have with recycling. Did they want bins? Did they want carts? Do you want the big carts for recycling? Do you want the medium carts for recycling?
Yeah.
Do you want 2 carts for the trash, 1 cart? All of that we listened to.
You then generate like a municipal addenda for each?
No, we do it in the bid spec sheets. We say, like, for example, on give us a bid for recycling once a week, give us a bid for recycling every other week.
No, on the bid, but then when you incorporate it into the agreement, is it
Then
gonna
we
be
have-
an addendum? Like, here's the Celine addendum.
Yes, we have to put it in, we put it in the section, so there's a service section on yard waste. We have general yard waste, and then we have for community blank. You'll be doing this.
Yeah, it's a cafeteria plan. You
Right,
pick, I get it, and then you incorporate it into the.
Well, you have one in there for 6 bags of waste under one, but it's just part of the contract and you say specifically, I think it's IPSI or
Right.
that allows for only 6 bags
right.
of compostable
So you-
waste. So it's right in the contract. It's not,
It ends up right in there, you're right.
it's right in the contract.
So for example, if you guys, let's just say, and I don't know, let's just say you wanted every house to have 2 95-gallon carts for their residential trash and no bags. I'm not saying that's what you want, I'm just saying if you wanted that, then that would be in the contract and that would be part of the bid. So they know on the face of this, how many households are in Scio, right? Because we put it on the face. How many are gonna now need 2 carts instead of 1? And how many are gonna want them to be 95 versus 65? And, you know, all of that ends up in the contract. And then it's a separate line item in the bid process.
You get anything, you just gotta pay for it.
So Ryan and then Jillian.
Mariah, I'll put this on the record. I vehemently object to Scio Township and the treasurer's office having to collect payments from all of these residents for a trash service. It is going to insanely increase our finance costs. And that's going to ultimately be borne by our residents again.
So in the contract, you would want Scio to be a direct bill community.
Correct.
And that goes in the contract.
I also object to the length of the contract. I think that having a 20-year contract is excessive. And I don't think it's necessarily serving the best interest of when things could come up, even if there are realtors.
Okay, so I hear you. I'm not gonna comment. I hear you.
Jillian?
Yeah, and this would be mandatory for all parcels, or do we have that option to say, no, it's only for the residents, the parcel that
So
want to?
that was raised, and if you read this template, you'll see that there's an amnesty period on cart size. So the way we strike,
I think she's asking if all parcels have to have service or not. Is that?
Mandatory.
oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yes. Every parcel would
And to
participate,
clarify, all parcels, including businesses?
I was gonna
or
say
all
residential or
parcels?
commercial?
not businesses.
Residential.
That's
Residential.
Well, we could have that in our addendum for Scio.
You could, if you had a carve out that you wanted, we just need to know that up front. Because then it changes the bid, right? If they're no longer bidding on all of your people, then the bid might change if they're bidding on a fraction of your people.
So. Is it every resident that wants trash pickup or every resident regardless if they want trash pickup?
We have some residents who opt out
I
entirely.
remember there was an opt-out, so and I was starting to explain to you the opt-out idea. You could have an opt-out period in the contract where citizens have the right to opt out. We had a amnesty period for the opt-out of, we give everybody a 95-gallon cart in this contract. But within so many days, if you're a house that doesn't generate a lot of waste, or you're just, maybe you're a single person living in a house and you don't generate a lot of waste, and you only want a 65-gallon cart, then you had so many days to say that, and you would get a 65-gallon cart. So you didn't have that big, rollout. So those kinds of things came up during our work on this.
Do they pay less if they have a 65-gallon cart?
No.
Okay.
So
And it only promotes people to generate trash.
before we go down this rabbit hole, because I can see a long conversation about what Bob was just describing, and I'd rather not engage in all of us in that. I'd like us to task Mariah with doing what we've been sort of contemplating here, and that is, as you proposed, actually working through the contract, putting in your edits and circulating it back to us as a kind of a single text draft, that we can then, all of us, including the trustees elect, react to and give you feedback on.
I have input on that, I guess, is that we're tasking a person to spend time and money to do something that I don't get the sense that we're warm.
Or warm up?
No, this is this
warm
is
up.
for the future benefit in case we just do decide to join.
It's kind of like an insurance policy.
So we might get kicked out of priority next February.
We could find ourselves,
But then we could also bid on our own.
we could, but this is basically trying to make this alternative the best that we can for Scio Township.
as an option.
Okay,
And you'll have the benefit of the RFP if you choose to go on your own.
the residents are still smarting
Yeah.
over a decision that was made 4 years ago. And it's still a very raw item.
We know.
And as a result, to take that same raw thing and say, okay, we're not only going to have told you we're doing one carrier and one hauler, we're now going to take that and go
20 years.
2 steps further away from the people that care about you and are acting on your behalf. And we're not gonna do the billing for it. We're not gonna take your calls for it. You know, call someone who
You have
cares.
to have trash,
What?
even if you don't want it.
Even if you don't want it, you must. And no matter if you get this size or that size, it's the same. I just feel that there's a wound out there.
There is.
Yeah, I mean,
But we may not have a choice.
Oh, yes, we will always.
there
have
is
to-
always,
Well, we want to at least see what our best option is here.
and
Even though-
I think that's, I mean, for me, I guess that's fair to see what, because we would then have to sell it. To,
No, we just impose it.
no, we just impose it. Well, that's what happened, and that's the wound and scar and,
Yeah,
and
that-
I
it's
don't
very
know if
raw.
you, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read the section 5 agreement that binds you to Warma. You don't, even when you're done, even when the RFP is done and everything, all the numbers are in, you still don't have to do it. You would not have to do it because you only have to do it if the pricing that the RFP obtains is a certain percentage better than the total service cost that you're currently paying. So there is a little condition of you having to be married
Agree with that?
to this.
And Tom, do you agree with it?
Well, you mentioned a couple of different things there and when I first read the attempted a formula for withdrawing from the RFP on the, what you call the membership or the pledge, I didn't understand it. And that's one of the things I sent to you in my email, suggesting that it be rewritten because it's a difficult thing.
And we did rewrite it and we used all your
I haven't
comments.
seen it yet.
Oh, Tom.
I haven't
So
seen.
Bob, would you agree though that right now Scio doesn't have a service cost? Because we're a direct, the residents are directly billed.
I agree. So
So there is no,
so
we
you,
get out regardless of what
Yes,
the price is.
because you get the, and Tom was the champion of this language, which he apparently doesn't. He gave me lots of good input on the section 5 agreement and I made all his changes. He wanted it to be your call at your subjectivity, at your discretion as to how you measure whether you're doing better with Warma or worse with Warma. So I put that language in and I think you've read the section 5.
I have read it and I honestly, I agree with Tom. It's complicated.
It is.
And at the first time I read it, I was like, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't.
Have
make
you
any
read the
sense.
most recent version?
Well, how do we know?
Which version is that?
Well, the one that,
Got a date on the bottom?
The one that came out maybe 2 weeks ago?
I think you have it.
I do have it. I'm not sure that I've read through it, but if you agree that right now Scio doesn't have a service cost, so we don't have to do 5%, we're 5% better than 0 is what we're talking about. So any
That's why your rep
price.
raised
we
that
get
point
out
and
of-
said, it's your discretion.
And I wanna note that you do spend staff time to handle the contract. Right?
Well, are you saying that that's a
Take-
service cost?
Takes costs, that's something that's in here, that's up to you to determine what those costs are and if you include those. We left that intentionally vague so that municipalities would figure those things out. So that they can determine what their costs were. Frankly, it's less of a concern for warm up. We wanted it to be something that the municipalities had hold
And
of.
you're not signing a section 5 contract anyways.
Right.
So it's irrelevant. The conversation is irrelevant, really.
I don't think it's irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant, but right now you're not gonna be in a position.
Right,
to decide.
right, but you know, what we're talking about here is someday we might be, so we're trying to plan. for that.
Yeah.
So definitely don't think it's irrelevant.
Well, I think what we're trying to do, if I may, is to try and use this opportunity, this window, for affecting the language of the contract, so that if Scio is ever faced with a choice of whether to participate in this WARMA structure, whatever it is at that point, that it's as good as we can make it at this point. In preparation for that, and the board, the future board that's faced with that decision may choose not to. Even though we're investing some effort and some, money, I guess, paying, for our attorney to do this work, in this contract, that future board may say, well, we like this other option better. And I think that's a good point, Bob, that doing this work on this contract could benefit Scio Township at that point, because we'll have put some thought into what a contract that we like would look like.
And you'll have an RFP that you might have liked, because the RFP is not going out without WARMA approval.
So the work product, I guess, Judy, it could serve a purpose to Scio Township in the future, regardless of whether Scio Township in the future chooses to participate.
Agreed.
So I don't know that we need to take a vote in order to sort of task you with this next step, Mariah, but do you feel like you have enough guidance at this point to move forward?
We do.
Okay.
If I may, can we get a timeline from Mr. Egremont as to when that would be due to WARMA?
To be sort of actionable for you, yeah.
Yeah, but in a timely fashion, because right now we're supposed to submit it for the October meeting, which would be October what?
21st.
What's that?
I think it's scheduled for the.
Whatever the third Monday is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Or we could,
ideally by then, if you need more time, as long as they're specific and then something that the warm board can incorporate before.
Yeah.
Cause we'll be talking about this at our October and November meetings, so it depends on what the nature of them are.
but
Because
we've been talking about this at meetings for a year now.
I think we started the joint conversation 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. So when you say it, that we don't wanna beat these, we have beat the issues. We spent a whole meeting on what was gonna be defined as the curb. Because it was that important. When you say, what does it mean to be curbside?
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time on that because it was important even Tom was raising good points on that, because one man's curb is not another man's curb. Right? One person's curb is not another person. We spent, we beat the heck out of that.
So if we have something to you by the 21st, or do you need it in advance of the 21st?
The 21st is fine, as long as we've got those in hand, we can talk about them at the meeting.
Yeah, Mariah, as long as it's filtering in, Mariah, it'll be fine.
Bring it back to us.
Yes, I will.
It's gonna be enough time.
Bob, are these public meetings that you have?
Yes,
So any of us are welcome to attend.
yeah, we get visitors from communities.
Visitors. Okay.
No, we get members of, members of.
There you go, you guys.
Well, we get members of the public. It's a public meeting. We have a call to the public. And people sometimes,
Taxpayers.
I'm sorry, I didn't use the right word, man. I really apologize. Yeah,
I think
I
that I can
understand.
give something to you by next Tuesday.
Okay, that would be great.
And then that will give you, if everyone could get stuff back by Friday, we could have something ready for the.
So this is gonna be quick turnaround time, but it's gonna be sort of each of us getting comments back to Mariah after she sends out a draft to all of us.
Sure. You can also send me comments now.
That's
You know,
true.
Ryan, I took some notes on what.
Well, yeah, because you can give us stuff after that date, we will still deal with it. Right, so get us your main stuff, but if something trickles in from another,
Yeah.
Sure.
get it to us.
When are you doing the RFP?
The board will vote on the RFP at the December meeting, so we wanna have everything fully incorporated and agreed upon by the Warmer board at December.
so we have
and then
time
it'll
to
go
get
out
through.
in January. So and that's in the timeline that we've been talking about for the last couple months.
So if you have things that follow up that are past October 21st, just get them to Tommy and get them to us.
Great. I have a quick, how did you become the attorney for Warma?
Yeah, so Bob has worked for the county on a number of things, and so he negotiated our host agreement with the landfill, which pays for all the solid waste things that we do. Through his work, we knew he did work on Sakra, and so the Warma board, he helped us form Warma. And then because he had a history of Warma and the members and the players, we worked with him to do that.
It's just allergies.
Well, thank you. And thanks, Tom, and Mark, I don't know, if you're still out there and you wanted to throw in a comment, I don't want to cut you out.
Yeah.
Well, I am here and I've generously listened over the past half a century. Seemingly. The only two thoughts that I want to leave you with is the importance of Scio getting the language that it wants in the contract. Because the intent is that whenever or if ever Scio joins the RFP waste hauling service, that we step in the shoes of the existing contract, the existing terms and conditions of the contract when we step into those shoes. So if it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, whatever that contract is in place, those are the shoes we're stepping into. So we get our language in upfront. And I want to also emphasize that the dollar amount of whatever the fee is, the per unit, household unit fee is, at the time we jump in, that's what we're going to pay. It's not as though we can shop for a better deal. It's what the then existing contract amount is. The second point that I wanted to make is that by way of history, before GFL, we had several haulers 5 days a week picking up trash and recyclables. We went to a license agreement where we have a single preferred hauler. And now what we're looking at potentially is if Scio joins the future Warma collection service, we will also be joining a single hauler, but with many more households. So it's what we have now, but on steroids. And I think Jillian made that point, or it could have been Joyce. I'm not sure who made the point, but nonetheless, it would be going to steroids. And those are the only two thoughts that I wanted to leave you with.
Thanks, Mark. All right, well, thank you very much. I think we've got our task cut out for us in the next week or so. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Public comment.
No, we already had public comment. There's only one.
Oh, it was just Mark on Zoom? There's nobody else on Zoom?
Well,
We only had one.
it wasn't really public comment. He was,
Oh,
he's
I see.
he's
Yes,
a
because it's
panelist.
special. Right.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a motion to adjourn by Knowles. There's a second.
Riser.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, we are adjourned at 7:35.
Hey. Big deal.
Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Well, I didn't follow up with you, but I did submit the tire reimbursement, so you should be getting that soon if you didn't get
Thanks
that.
for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it. It was a real pleasure.
Like this morning.
I swear to God, they know you. Oakland County. I do a lot of work.
I was a county prosecutor.
Well, I represent a lot of you.